Breaking out into game development can be quite an audacious task for any developer. There's just as much potential for failure as there is for success. Likewise, a good first impression can often be the key to a developer's long-term future. Such was the case for Shift Up in September of 2021. It was here during a PlayStation showcase that they made their grand debut, presenting gamers everywhere with a glimpse of their first major title, a third-person action game with a female protagonist. Set in a post-apocalyptic sci-fi world with a clear focus on close-quarters combat and grandiose boss fights, even from the beginning it was pretty clear that Shift Up was putting a lot of work into making their game as visually dynamic as possible, particularly in regards to the character models. They even went the extra mile to base their main character on a real-life Korean model, while the various monsters you fight throughout the game were designed by Hee-Jo Jang, who you might recognize as being the brains behind other famous movie monsters like The Host and Okja. Safe to say, Shift Up was putting their all into this game, but in this day and age, with such a large emphasis being placed on the design of the characters, they were going to get their fair share of critics before their project was even complete. After all, if a game has hot girls in it, then it's obviously going to fail. There's nothing else worthwhile to be found here, right? Well, it turns out that couldn't be further from the truth. Since its release, this game has garnered worldwide praise from both gamers and critics, selling well over 3 million copies worldwide and reaching over 183,000 concurrent players on PC within a day, the highest ever for a single-player game published by Sony. So how did they do it? How did Shift Up manage to bring sexy back into the games industry? Well, let's find out. This is Stellar Blade. In the far future, humanity has been pushed to the brink of extinction, forced to leave Earth after losing a war against monstrous creatures known as Naytibas. Now, centuries later, the latest deployment of humanity's armed forces, the 7th Airborne Squad, travels to Earth in an attempt to try and reclaim the planet. Among those chosen for this mission is our main protagonist, Eve. Sadly though, the invasion ends in disaster. The entire 7th Airborne Squad is wiped out by a powerful alpha Naytiba, with Eve being left as the sole survivor after her friend and commander, Taki, sacrificed herself to protect her. She would have died alongside her that day if it weren't for the intervention of Adam, a scavenger from the last human city on Earth, Zion. He enlists Eve's help in searching the planet for hypercells, which can be used to help improve life in Zion and awaken the thousands of humans that are asleep within the city. In return for her help, Adam and the people of Zion will lend their resources to help Eve locate the alpha Naytibas that are hidden across the planet. It's during one of these searches that she also encounters a survivor of the 5th Airborne Squad, Lily, who thanks to her engineering expertise is able to provide Eve with advanced technology that can greatly improve her chances of survival. With both Adam and Lily by her side, Eve travels across the ruins of Earth in search of the monsters that destroyed her homeworld, all in the hopes of one day reclaiming the planet in the name of humanity. But as she begins to uncover Earth's ancient history along with the true origins of the Naytibas, Eve will start to realize that this war for the planet isn't as straightforward as she's been led to believe.
I want to send the memories left here to Mother Sphere. That's where they belong.
I'll help.
Me too, me too.
Thank you, both of you.
Shift Up certainly knows how to kick off a story with a bang. You'd think for their first game that they'd want to start off with a more simple narrative, but Stellar Blade quickly proves to be surprisingly complex. Everything from the characters to the environment has been given an impressive amount of care and detail, allowing players to easily immerse themselves in this world and its unique take on the post-apocalypse. In doing so, Stellar Blade effectively proves to be every bit the epic adventure that you'd expect it to be. One that will take you from the ruins of forgotten cities to inhospitable deserts to even the vastness of space. There's no corner of this world that feels untouched by humanity or the monsters that destroyed them. Wherever you go, there's a story to be told, and should you go looking, then you might find yourself asking some genuinely interesting questions about the nature of humanity. In many ways, Stellar Blade is a retelling of both Genesis and Revelations, only with a sci-fi spin to it, while in many other ways, it's a rather blunt exploration of the long-term consequences of radicalized religion and its effects on one's character. However you choose to look at it though, Stellar Blade is a genuinely good story, featuring plenty of twists and turns that can quickly ramp up the tension, leaving one guessing as to how everything is going to unfold. Yet even so, it still manages to find the time to slow down the pace and let the characters simply be themselves. Through many exchanges throughout this long story, you can grow to better understand the Airborne Squads, the people of Zion, as well as those who inhabit the wastelands, all of whom, even the most one-note of characters, have been given a surprising amount of depth. But without a doubt, the biggest highlight of this game for me is our main protagonist, Eve, a woman who embodies everything modern media despises.
Then I'll go ahead on foot. You can use the drone to guide me.
What? The wasteland is a lot bigger than you think.
I can't just sit here and wait. In fact, I want to see the wasteland with my own eyes.
In a time where every major female protagonist seems to be an overly masculine badass who needs to constantly prove their superiority to everyone around them, it's refreshing to have a heroine who's both good looking and a genuinely good person at the same time. Instead of someone who needs to be convinced to help people, here we have someone who's prepared to step up and assist with even the most menial of assignments, all the while being skilled enough with a blade to turn any monster that comes her way into Swiss cheese. Needless to say, it's a welcome change of pace, and considering how grim this story can get at times, Eve's more positive personality goes a long way to stop the narrative from becoming too dark. She's the light in an otherwise cold and unforgiving world, one that all the supporting characters can't help but drift towards, which in turn inspires them to be their best selves. With a warm-hearted protagonist like Eve at the helm, the player can better empathize with the struggles facing humanity on an now ruined Earth without needing to constantly bombard the player with needlessly complex metaphors and symbolism that isn't as subtle as some people seem to think it is. Stellar Blade is an earnest narrative that, like the design of its characters, doesn't shy away from what it's trying to do. Despite how bleak the setup for this game was, it quickly proves to have quite the charming story, one capable of showcasing the ever-present beauty of the Earth whilst also demonstrating the unbreakable human will to survive, as well as the dangers found within blind faith. Thanks to a cast of distinct characters, this game is able to effectively articulate these themes without needing to make the story too complex for the player to understand, while through the character's actions, one will grow to better understand a world that has been ravaged by time and the desperate fight to reclaim something that might no longer exist. Sure, the dialogue might come off as too cheesy or generic at times, but this female-led narrative managed to accomplish what most mainstream developers failed to do, and that's portray the positive aspects of feminism without needing to downplay anyone's looks, all the while being backed up by some stellar gameplay. You know, I honestly feel bad for some game journalists. I mean, it's bad enough that Shift Up managed to write a compelling story full of beautiful characters, but to complement that with an engrossing combat loop that's equal parts challenging and rewarding, well, that makes it harder to classify this action RPG as nothing more than eye candy, doesn't it? Stellar Blade is a good case of never judging a book by its cover, featuring a combat system that emphasizes the importance of understanding enemy attack patterns, one which manages to maintain a frantic pace whilst also providing players with enough challenging enemies that they'll have to be cautious. To ensure success in battle, you'll need to take full advantage of all your combat abilities, combining skills and combos to overcome a wide myriad of enemies. Eve's primary weapon is her sword, Blood Edge, an elegant blade that fits quite nicely in her hair. With this sword, Eve can employ a mixture of light and heavy attacks in a series of combo chains, allowing one to gradually wear down her enemies before striking a killing blow. Naturally, every combo has its own pace and length to it, which when carefully timed can give Eve a more defensive or aggressive stance in battle, effectively allowing the player to set the pace for each fight regardless of who you're up against. That said, the Naytibas won't just stand there and let you rip them to pieces. In fact, many of them are capable of moving just as fast, if not even faster than you, with some even able to block or counter your attacks. As such, knowing when to be aggressive and when to play defensively is instrumental for surviving any combat encounter. Throughout this lengthy campaign, you'll encounter a wide range of different Naytibas, from small humanoid monsters to large animal-like behemoths. Some can turn invisible, attack from a distance, or even launch a barrage of attacks too fast for anyone to effectively block. There's a wide range of different monsters to fight, each with their own patterns, gimmicks, and behaviors that can make them a challenge to contend with. But no matter how complex they might seem, every enemy has their own flaws that you can exploit. So once you have a firm grasp on their moveset, that's when you can start dealing out damage. For example, if an enemy is unaware of your presence, then you can employ an execution attack, which has the potential to deal high levels of damage to your opponent or even instantly kill them, making it one of the best ways to start a fight or remove a particularly difficult enemy from the field. In other cases, should your enemies distance themselves from you, then you can easily close the gap by employing a rush attack, an aggressive forward dash that allows you to effectively punish your enemies, but it does have a brief cooldown with every use, so it's best to use it wisely. Then there are the more defensive measures you can take in combat. Naturally, you can block any attack that's dealt to you, with the exception of unblockable moves of course. But should you manage to block an enemy's blow just as it's about to land, you'll parry the attack. While this is more risky than dodging, should you time it right, then any damage you would have taken from your enemy's attack will be completely negated. Furthermore, parrying has the potential to knock your enemy off balance, leaving them open for a counterattack. On the other end of the spectrum, dodging attacks is always an effective way of avoiding damage, but naturally, the further you push yourself away from the enemy, the less likely you can take advantage of any openings they might have. As such, if you stick close to your enemy and dodge their attacks at the last second, then you'll be able to pass through them, completely avoiding any damage you might have otherwise taken. Again, it might be riskier, but the reward is a clear window to strike back against your enemies, a commodity that will become highly valued, especially against the game's many bosses, where more so than any other opponent, careful timing and precision will be your key to victory. Of course, there are occasions where a simple parry or dodge won't be enough to evade danger. Whenever an enemy shines bright blue, it means they're about to use a fatal attack. These, unlike regular attacks, cannot be parried or dodged. Instead, if you want to avoid them, then you'll need to counter it with a blink, a unique dodge move that teleports Eve directly behind her foe, avoiding incoming damage and allowing you to follow up with a brutal counteroffensive. The timing for this move is incredibly precise, so if you get it wrong, then you'll have to endure whatever onslaught your opponent has planned for you. But if done correctly, then it can effectively shift the tide of combat in your favor. It becomes pretty clear very early into playing this game that knowing when to attack and when to evade is essential for your long-term survival, as is managing your resources and effectively utilizing your many special abilities. With every action you take in combat, one of Eve's 3 energy gauges will begin to fill, paving the way for you to employ some of the game's most powerful attacks and gameplay mechanics, each of which capable of drastically altering the landscape of the battlefield. There's the beta gauge, which fills with every successful parry and dodge. Once done so, the beta gauge can be spent on thrusting strikes focused on singular targets and wide slashes perfect for crowd control. Then there's the burst gauge, which fills through successive parries and combos, which in turn allows players to activate buffs that can greatly enhance their base capabilities or even execute powerful attacks. With these 2 meters, players can effectively shift a fight in their favor, and with the right upgrades can pretty much end most fights the moment they start. Yet as powerful as the burst and beta gauge can be, the power they offer pales in comparison to the raw might of the 3rd and final gauge. While the first 2's energy is devoted to a series of individual abilities, this one instead provides players with an entirely new form. Named rather appropriately after Eve's friend, Taki mode is a super form that when triggered will temporarily make you invincible and give you access to a wide range of new moves. In this enhanced state, Eve's damage output and movement speed is greatly increased, allowing you to tear through most enemies with ease. Although, while you're in this form, you don't gain any beta or burst energy while fighting. Furthermore, once it's used, you'll have to defeat a large number of enemies before you're able to use it again. So more often, Taki mode is best saved as a last resort in combat. Still, once you've sunk some upgrades into this form, I won't blame you for activating it whenever you get the chance. It can be a lot of fun turning into a one-winged angel and murdering everyone around you. Of course, there will be occasions where a blade won't solve all your problems. During these moments, you'll have to give thanks to Lily for transforming a simple means of communication into a full-blown arsenal for Eve to use. With a large ammo pool and plenty of customization options, the drone is easily one of the most underrated aspects of the combat. Not only does it allow you to attack enemies from a distance, but it also possesses its own skill tree for you to upgrade, whilst also featuring a myriad of different ammo types, all of which with their own damage output and fire rate. Some, like the slug shells, are better for stunning enemies, while others, like the stinger missiles and charge blaster, are ideal for inflicting high levels of damage. Play your cards right and you can effectively shred an enemy's health before they even come within striking distance. Of course, there is a price for such power. While you are using the drone, Eve is far less mobile than she would be normally, meaning that short window to dodge oncoming attacks will be a lot smaller than it would be normally. So it's not the kind of weapon you can just stand there and keep using indefinitely. You'll need to pick your moments, fire when you can, and keep moving to avoid taking damage. Furthermore, should you run out of ammo, then you can easily acquire more from supply crates or just by exploring your environment, so you'll never be deprived of your gun for too long. That said, even without it, Stellar Blade's combat is insanely dynamic. When you consider all the tricks you can pull off courtesy of Blood Edge, the numerous skills and gauges at your disposal, along with both a superform and a customizable ranged weapon, you'll never be starved for options, especially when considering the many augments you can apply to both your weapons and your character, all of which can drastically shake up the combat in new and unexpected ways. Safe to say, Stellar Blade manages to strike the right balance between challenging combat and engaging gameplay without sacrificing the player's enjoyment. It encourages you to tackle the combat at your own pace, all the while providing players with plenty of avenues to improve themselves should they struggle. Shift Up is able to accomplish all of this whilst also designing a vibrant game world that you can't help but lose yourself in. Much like its contemporaries, Stellar Blade boasts a number of fully fleshed out and interconnected locations for the player to explore, each with its own secrets to uncover and stories to be told. From vast deserts to ruined cities to broken down subway stations to even an elevator into space. Each of these locales has its own look and feel to it, with some evoking a more serene or dramatic atmosphere, while others can be downright unnerving to explore. Most of these levels feature an open and spacious environment, giving players free rein to run, jump, and climb around however they wish, while others are more in keeping with a Metroidvania style of level design, with narrow hallways and linear paths that gradually open up to reveal an intricately designed game world, one that the player can easily navigate at a fast pace while still enjoying its dynamic combat loop. Not only can one find shortcuts to previously explored areas, but thanks to the many telephone booths scattered throughout the world, the player will be able to travel to any other telephone or campsite that they've uncovered, allowing for fast travel from one corner of the map to another without having to waste time running around just to reach a particular spot. Although considering Eve naturally enters a fast sprint whenever you're running for prolonged periods, traversing the open world is hardly ever going to be dull, especially with all the collectibles one might find on their travels. From weapon and health upgrades to new cosmetics to even collectible cans. Sure, some of these might be more worthwhile than others, but I won't lie, the feeling you get whenever you find a can of soda always brought a smile to my face. The developers have made sure to provide players with a good selection of hard and easy to find collectibles, with some simply being out in plain sight, while others may require you to complete a puzzle or utilize Eve's platforming skills to reach it. Very rarely will this game restrict your exploration. In fact, aside from a few locked chests around the start of the game, the vast majority of the collectibles can be acquired right from the get-go. This means that if you pay close attention to your surroundings and take advantage of your drone's ability to highlight key points in your environment, then then you can push Eve to the peak of her power in no time, whilst also indulging in one of the most violent dress-up games on the PS5. Of course, not everything is just going to be handed to you on a silver platter. In fact, one of the best methods for unlocking new outfits or gathering large amounts of resources is by completing side missions, many of which can range from simple stuff like tracking down lost relics and missing people or simply killing a difficult foe, to more personal requests like helping a machine find his lost memories, searching a junkyard for some old family mementos, or even helping mend a fractured relationship. These jobs can go a long way in providing context for this world, adding more emotional weight to an already complex narrative whilst also taking full advantage of Stellar Blade's multi-layered world design. That said, if there was a flaw to be found here, it's that I wish the developers were a bit more creative with how they implemented some of the platforming mechanics. What few sequences there are that test one's skills are sadly too short to truly leave a definitive mark on the player, while the rest of the time you're mostly just dealing with bog standard jumping and climbing challenges, not exactly the sort of thing that has you questioning your every move. Sure, it was definitely a lot of fun traversing this post-apocalyptic world, especially whenever you got the chance to surf around on your sword, but with just a little refinement, Shift Up could have had multiple avenues to test the player's skills rather than relying solely on the combat. Hell, even the fishing minigame proved to be more stressful than most of the platforming challenges, which is no easy feat to accomplish. Still, considering this is Shift Up's first foray into console development, I can forgive them for overlooking something so simple, especially when they've provided players with so many unique environments to explore and a plethora of ways to get around. Combine this with all the unique enemies you might encounter, the secrets you can discover, along with the many stories hidden throughout the environment, and one can easily lose hours of their life in this breathtaking game. To say Shift Up had struck gold here would be quite the understatement. They've crafted a gameplay loop that is able to effectively keep its audience engaged, which in turn inspired their composers to deliver one of the best soundtracks of 2024.
Eve, map data restoration complete.
That's great. But the road ended.
Well, the core signal is leading to the road up there.
Then let's find a way up.
Wait, you're really going there?
Shift Up didn't simply deliver a run-of-the-mill sci-fi soundtrack, they crafted an entire orchestra that perfectly adapts to every situation. You might think that I'm exaggerating, but with over 189 songs in its catalog, this is a soundtrack that can leave you feeling basically anything, from bewilderment to genuine rage to even a longing for the past. Thanks to the composers employing a wide range of different instruments and singers, Shift Up has ensured that no two melodies can be mistaken for each other. Every beat, tempo, and sensation that this soundtrack creates is one that is inherently distinct to itself. With Keiichi Okabe and Studio Monaca providing over 40% of the game's music, Shift Up is able to draw inspiration from studio veterans who've worked on the likes of Tekken and Nier Automata, allowing them to develop music that can easily adjust its intensity depending on the circumstances in the game. So one moment you could be savoring the picturesque landscapes around you with a tender melody playing in the background, only for the instruments to ramp up their intensity upon initiating combat, all of which is done without any breaks or disruptions to the rest of the soundscape. Meanwhile, the remaining 60% of the music is produced in-house by Huang Juan, who's taken the liberty to add everything from acoustic guitar-led tracks to full-blown jazz sessions to even operatic themes, ensuring that a good sense of variety can be found within Stellar Blade's soundtrack whilst also providing an extra layer of nuance without having to drastically alter the game's atmosphere. This is a sentiment which has been shared amongst the rest of Stellar Blade's sound design. From gusts of wind rushing against natural vegetation, to the non-stop roar of an endless ocean, to the quiet chatter of birds in the distance. Every sound effect resonates in the air, making this world feel just a little bit more alive the longer you remain present in it. Yet even in a location that is ripe with vegetation, one cannot escape the clatter of metal or the unnatural squelching created by the Naytibas, resulting in this never-ending symphony agony of nature clashing with the artificial. For as alive as this world can be, it's hard to find anywhere that hasn't been corrupted by monsters or destroyed by time. So whenever you do find a locale that is seemingly untouched by the outside world, the sights and sounds you find there stand out all the more. Shift Up has gone above and beyond to provide gamers with a soundscape that perfectly complements this breathtaking world. One which can effectively highlight its beauty as much as its horror.
Hold on. I heard something. Behind you! He was using a dead body as its host.
I don't think it can be understated just how beautiful this game is. Shift Up went above and beyond to make Stellar Blade shine on the PS5. Utilizing Unreal Engine 4, they made sure that everything from the character models to the environments to the weather and particle effects have been refined to absolute perfection, resulting in a game whose visuals can leave you at a loss for words at any given moment, even as its enemies try to rip you to pieces. No easy feat, especially for a new developer. Yet Shift Up not only managed to succeed in their endeavors, they far surpassed expectations. Taking full advantage of next-gen hardware, they presented players with a lush and vibrant post-apocalyptic landscape, one featuring a series of distinct and expansive vistas, each with their own secrets to uncover and horrors to unearth. Some focus more on natural fauna to show the long-term effects time has had upon the world, while others dabble more in classic sci-fi tropes, presenting players with these massive superstructures that make Eve look like a tiny speck in comparison. Whatever the case might be, there's a real sense of wonder to be found in Stellar Blade's environment. Furthermore, even if Eve is just a speck on the horizon, she's a damn fine looking one. Unsurprising considering her character model is based on real-life South Korean model Shin Jae-eun, who, along with many others, had her body scanned using 3D technology so that they could serve as the basis for their in-game characters. By implementing such technology, it would have made it a lot easier for the developers to craft the ideal look for these characters without losing any of their realistic features. So yes, despite what some critics might believe, women can look like this. When you've got a main protagonist this damn gorgeous, it's only right that you supply her with a plethora of different outfits to wear, preferably both modest and scandalous ones. Needless to say, Shift Up delivered that and so much more. There are so many outfits for Eve to wear in this that it's hard to just pick one for an entire playthrough. Personally, I found myself changing looks rather frequently, which isn't something I usually do in games like this. Usually once I found an outfit I liked, I'd just stick with it until something cooler came along. But with Stellar Blade, I found myself using the entirety of this ruined world as my personal runway. Safe to say, Stellar Blade is as much a fashion game as it is an action-adventure, and clearly the developers believe this too. Since its initial release, they've added even more outfits for Eve to wear. From seasonal attire and elaborate swimwear to full-on collaborations with other video games like Nier Automata, allowing a new generation of gamers to appreciate some of the best designed outfits in all of gaming. So take notes, Ubisoft. This is how you do a collab. Not by obscuring a character's natural beauty, but by letting it shine. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, this game is full of visually appealing characters, and not just among our main cast. Even the most robotic looking NPCs have more nuance to be found in their designs than what can be seen in most Western games these days. That said, while the humans in Stellar Blade tend to ride the fine line of realism, the monstrous Naytibas take a nosedive straight into the surreal. Courtesy of monster designer Hee Cho-jang, he wanted to give a real sense of familiarity to the Naytibas, often by basing their looks around various plants and fauna, while others are more unnatural, taking on religious iconography that perfectly complements their more twisted and malformed physical bodies. All this variety goes a long way to ensure that even the most one-note enemy in this game is memorable in some way. If not for the many ways they'll kick your ass, it'll definitely be due to how unnatural they look when compared to everything else around you.
Look!
While it's not hard to understand why Stellar Blade was so successful, despite so much negative press being directed towards it both before and after release, gamers everywhere quickly recognized what Shift Up had created here. Not a game that bombards its players with non-stop pornography and is openly sexist towards women, but a third-person action game that featured fast-paced combat, a vast open world for players to explore, and an intriguing story that demonstrates the dangers of unfounded faith. With a soundtrack composed by the legendary Okabe-san and visuals that can leave you both horrified and captivated at any given moment, how can you not enjoy this game? Especially when it manages to strike the right balance in difficulty to challenge its players. Shift Up wisely chose to draw their inspiration from some of the best action games in recent history, and it paid off. They've managed to create a game that proves women can be heroes without needing to downplay their looks, and frankly, I wish more games these days had the guts to embrace that. After all, when you choose aesthetics over an agenda, the only people with anything to complain about will be those who really shouldn't be a part of the games industry to begin with. So to Shift Up, I say, nicely done. I look forward to seeing what you cook up next.